Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight, nearly a year after police shot and killed 13-year-old Adam Toledo, Chicago police announced changes to the foot pursuit policy. We share the latest.
This is a day that it's finally come. Today in America.
After being stalled since 2019, a bipartisan deal to renew the Violence Against Women Act could finally be in reach.
We responded to almost 8,000 calls.
Niles sees an uptick in COVID response calls. That and more from the northwest suburb.
More than 200 UIC athletes are barred from playing in their conference championships. We hear why.
I never thought we would close the restaurant and then I would be in real estate full time.
If you're looking for a good real estate agent, there are a lot more to choose from.
And ancient artwork in a new setting. We visit a rejuvenated gallery of Egyptian artifacts at the Art Institute of Chicago.
And Brandis and Paris, as you mentioned, I'm in Niles, where I'll be reporting live tonight as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. It's a suburb well known for its replica of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but it's also a place that's thinking about how to revamp one of its major anchor businesses for the future. We'll talk about all that and much more coming up soon, but for now, back to you.
All right, Nick, we'll look forward to that. And now to some of today's top stories. Mayor Lori Lightfoot and Police Superintendent David Brown stood next to Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx for a rare joint press conference to announce criminal charges in connection with a West Side shootout. The shootout happened last fall after a violent confrontation between two groups, resulting in at least one death. Foxx today announced a Class X felony weapons charge for one person allegedly involved in the altercation, but she says she anticipates more charges coming.
Today's charges are an example of how the system works through collaboration and the fact that we are all working together to keep our communities safe.
Chicago Public Schools unveils its schedule for next year and is asking parents to weigh in. The district is proposing two options. One, to begin classes on August 22nd, 2 weeks before Labor Day. The other option would be a week later on August 29th. Parents will have until next Friday to fill out the survey and vote on their preferred schedule. Chicago civil rights icon Reverend Jesse Jackson says he's reached out to NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell in regards to the diversity of head football coaches. Jackson says he wants to be a part of the process to help diversify the head coaching ranks in the NFL. In a USA Today column, Jackson slammed the treatment of former Dolphins head coach Brian Flores, who was fired after 3 seasons and passed over for new head coaching opportunities. Jackson says he has yet to hear back from Goodell. COVID rates drop again in Chicago and throughout the state. The city recorded a 2.7% test positivity rate over the last 24 hours. That's compared to 4.1% a week ago. Meanwhile, the state recorded 5,400 new COVID cases and is running a 7-day average of 6,141 cases per day. That is down from nearly 9,400 a day a week ago. And up next, changes to the Chicago Police Department's foot pursuit policy. So please stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Chicago police leaders say they will revise foot pursuit policy rules governing when and why officers can give chase on foot. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more details. Heather, the mayor and the police department put forth rules several months ago. They got met with a lot of pushback. So what are the rules they're announcing today?
Well, we have to go back to March of last year when the city was really engulfed in an outcry over the deaths of 13-year-old Adam Toledo and 22-year-old Anthony Alvarez, both of whom were shot and killed by police after foot chases. That forced the department to develop its first ever policy regarding foot pursuits. But like you said, that policy was greeted with a lot of criticism as being too vague and insufficient. The revised policy released today would give supervisors a larger role to play during these chases, and it makes clear that foot pursuits are only appropriate in cases where there is a legitimate law enforcement priority.
Heather, what's the reaction to this from within and without the police department?
Well, I spoke with Ed Yanka of the ACLU of Illinois. They were one of the groups that really thought the initial policy was insufficient. He said it was a step in the right direction because it acknowledges that foot pursuits are dangerous for everyone involved, the officers, the people being pursued, and people who might be nearby. But he said there's more work to be done because he thinks foot pursuits should only be limited to serious cases where there is a threat to public safety. There's a link in my story on our website where people can go to weigh in on the new policy until February 25th, and police officials expect it to go into effect this summer.
All right, so there's a public comment period here because that was going to be my next question. What are the next steps for this policy?
Right. And we should say that I reached out to Illinois Attorney General Kwame Rule for his take on this. He was also critical of the initial policy. His office declined to comment.
All right, Heather Sharon, thanks so much for filling us in.
Thanks, Paris.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. That's WTTW.com/news. And now, Brandis, we toss it back to you.
Paris, thank you. The village of Niles is a near northwest suburb just across the Chicago border and near Skokie, Morton Grove, and Park Ridge. It's home to a multicultural population of about 30,000 people with a higher than average proportion of seniors. And it's in the process of reimagining a once vibrant retail center in need of an overhaul. As part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series, Nick Blumberg and producer Acacia Hernandez spent the day in Niles, and Nick joins us now. Nick.
That's right, Brandis. A lot of questions about the village's future right now. Efforts, as you mentioned, to redevelop Golf Mill Mall, a nearby park, and thinking about ways to improve infrastructure and pedestrian safety. As you mentioned, the village does have a higher than average population over 65. It's also got a higher than average COVID vaccination rate, with more than 73% in this zip code fully vaccinated. But the pandemic has still presented challenges for village services. The Niles Fire Department has been a key part of the local COVID response, coordinating PPE donations, distributing them to hospitals, nursing homes, and multifamily buildings. Last year, the department saw a record call volume.
We responded to almost 8,000 calls. So I'd say we've definitely seen a continued uptick in calls. COVID didn't stop all the other emergencies from occurring. So like you said, all those people who were having heart attacks or strokes, or those fires or vehicle accidents, all those other emergencies are continuing to go on, so we have to be able to transition between COVID response and non-COVID response, really in the blink of an eye.
Perhaps the best-known attraction in Niles is its half-size replica of the Leaning Tower of Pisa on Toohey Avenue. Built in the 1930s, it underwent a major restoration a few years back to get its historic bronze bells ringing again after decades of silence. We've got a link to that story on our website. Now, in the coming months and years, the village hopes to have visitors be able to climb up to the top with a view of Chicago's skyline on a clear day, and to use the plaza below as a gathering space for things like concerts or art fairs. That's in line with its original intention as part of a park built for businessman Robert Ilg's employees.
Specifically for the tower, he wanted people to learn about other cultures, and that's a big value for us here in Niles, is really learning about other cultures and embracing people's differences and traditions. And so certainly that's one of our goals on having events here and having gatherings here is we have such a diverse community that we want people to come and look at the tower, experience it, but also to share each other's cultures and celebrate our community.
Historian and author Tom Ferraro also hopes newfound energy at the Leaning Tower Plaza might attract things like a train station, something he says the village wanted as far back as 80 or 100 years ago.
Obviously, if you look at Rosemont and Ravinia for years, obviously on the North Shore, those kind of places do very well, like entertainment venues like that, and they bring the community together again.
It's a community that Ferraro says has a lot of history people might not know, like the Tam O'Shanter Golf Course, which he says is arguably the birthplace of modern professional golf.
The highest paying in tournaments in televised golf in the 1940s and 50s. Every name in golf pretty much played there. And it's, as a big highlight, it's still open as a public course. The Niles Park District now runs it as a 9-hole course, so you can still play a round of golf on a historical course.
Now, as we've mentioned, Niles is home to a diverse population. What started as a German farming community later saw a huge influx of Polish residents and now has a large South Asian population as well. The need for services catered to different communities is what prompted Universal Metro Asian Services to come to Niles. Founded in nearby Des Plaines in 1992, it opened its Niles location more than 20 years ago. It offers things like home care, adult daycare, and fresh cooked food to the South Asian population. The organization's founder says its clients often felt isolated after moving to the United States, especially those who moved when they were already older.
They do not know how to go anywhere. They cannot read the sign, they cannot read anything, and they cannot drive. So it was very, very difficult. They were cocooned in the home. So that's the thing you see here. We have to speak their language. We have to observe all the festivals, all the cultural program which we used to do in India. So that we create India for them. And the food, definitely, ethnic, appropriate food for them is very important.
The group also helped all its clients get vaccinated after shots became available. They donated meals when the pandemic first struck. Kumar says many clients were afraid when COVID-19 first hit, and while they're still cautious, the in-home care offers seniors independence, and the daytime gatherings offer a sense of community and a chance to get up on their feet and dance well into their 80s and 90s. One client we met is just about to turn 96, so happy early birthday. We'll have much more from Niles coming up, including a group that works with some of its young residents, as well as we'll hear more from the mayor about plans to redevelop Gulf Mill Mall and breathe new life into some of the village's outdoor spaces. But for now, Brandis, back to you.
The group of dancers is pretty cute, Nick. Thank you. And now to Paris and controversy over college athletics in Chicago. Paris.
Brandis, more than 200 student athletes at the University of Illinois Chicago are being barred from participating in conference championship events. The decision comes from their conference, the Horizon League, after UIC announced it'll be leaving the league and joining the Missouri Valley Conference next year. All of this as some championships are set to begin in just a week. And joining us now with more are Tiana Jackson, a senior who plays on the women's basketball team and president of UIC's Student Athlete Advisory Committee, and Michael Lippitz, the director of athletics at the University of Illinois Chicago. And Horizon League provided us with a statement that we'll get to in just a moment, but they did not send a representative with us tonight. We are glad that the two of you are here. Tiana, I'll start with you. The women's basketball conference tournament starts in less than a month. What is your reaction and your teammates' reaction to this decision?
Honestly, we definitely had our hardships this season, but at the end of the day, that we know that once it comes to postseason play, everyone's record is 0-0. So that's definitely another opportunity to really get at it and, come together and upset some teams, ruin some people's season. And now we won't even have that chance at redemption. We're just going to have to end the season just playing our hardest. But we definitely did get stripped of the chance to compete in any postseason play.
And of course, in basketball, in this conference, if you want to go to the NIT or NCAA tournament, usually the teams have to win their conference tournament. Michael Lippitz, give us a sense of the reaction all across your sports programs and the university.
Yeah, it was a hard day Tuesday to receive this news. This impacts 13 of our 18 teams and over 200 of our 300 student athletes. So you touched on basketball, but even before that, next week, our swimming and diving teams we're set to go to Indianapolis to compete in Horizon League championships. The week after, indoor track and field is set for its championships, and all the way through the rest of the spring with our spring sports. So it's a devastating impact for these student athletes, and we don't understand. We know that this is within the board's purview, the Horizon League presidents, to take this action. We don't understand why they chose to take it. It's entirely unnecessary.
Tiana Jackson, you mentioned that the conference tournament is a chance to start 0-0, a chance to upset some teams, but does this also have an impact on players' lives post-college? Say the tournament might be a good place to display your skills to professional teams.
Absolutely. I feel like as athletes, majority of us have devoted our entire lives to the sport that we're playing, constantly giving our blood, sweat, tears, our energy, our time. And it's Division I at the end of the day. We invest so much of our lives into the sport, and majority of the time we are working towards rings. Like that is why we play our sport, to compete at a high level. And a lot of us want the opportunity to play professionally, play overseas, you know, get those looks and be able to like really just be the best at our sport. And to have that taken away, it's unimaginable to do that to students, athletes, who our main goal is to be the best that we can be in anything that we do. And we won't even have that opportunity anymore.
And Horizon League officials laid out their rationale in a statement saying, quote, when UIC announced its intent to leave the Horizon League at the end of the 2021-2022 season, UIC chose not to comply with the league's bylaw requiring that written notice of such intention must be received on or before July 1st, 1 year before the withdrawal date. In this instance, UIC needed to provide notice before July 1st, 2022 and remain a member until July 1st, 2023 to be in compliance within league bylaws and preserve opportunities for UIC teams. So, Michael, frustration aside, isn't the Horizon League just following its own protocol here?
The league can't hide behind its bylaws. That's a false choice. The bylaws also indicate that the league has the purview to take whatever action it deems appropriate with respect to a departing member. The Horizon League presidents met and made this choice consciously. They voted to punish our student athletes. They didn't have to, they chose to. So they can say they're following the bylaws, but this serves no legitimate purpose other than to inflict pain on our student athletes. I would ask, why is it okay that we can complete the regular seasons in all of our winter sports and all of our spring sports, but it's the postseason opportunity that the league has taken away?
Michael, let me ask you this. Was there any scenario in which UIC could have made this decision to go to a different conference within the time frame that Horizon League is talking about?
There's not, because we don't control the national landscape of conference realignment. The opportunity was presented in January. And we know that in the long run, this is in the best interest of the institution, of the athletics department, and future student athletes. What it doesn't change is the impact that it's having on our current student athletes. But it's an impact that's not necessary. The league chose to take this stance. They chose to inflict this harm on our student athletes. They can also choose to change their mind, and that's what we're asking for. The Horizon League presidents can come together anytime they choose. They could do it today and change this decision. It's unjust, and it doesn't need to stand.
Tiana Jackson, are there any other avenues, do you think, to appeal this decision to the Horizon League officials?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing for us right now is just getting support from other schools, from other people, from anyone be No one would want to be in a situation where they're doing something that they loved, and the opportunity to be the best at it, to be named that title gets taken from them. No one would want to be in this position, especially no student athlete. I mean, this is really what we put majority of our time and effort into. And yeah, I just feel like it's about coming together and just being there to support, because I know we aren't the only institution that's dealing with this right now. So it's supporting everyone. I don't think this bylaw should exist. And if it exists at the expense of athletes. So I truthfully don't think that the bylaw should even be a bylaw. And at the end of the day, laws are made for people by people, and they're actively choosing not to change their mind. And it really isn't fair. It's unjust. And all student athletes across the world are infuriated by the decisions that these conferences are making.
And Michael Lippitz, you mentioned that you got invited to join the Missouri Valley Conference. Loyola Chicago is in that conference. They're joining the Atlantic 10 Conference. So a lot of realignment happening. What does that change bring to UIC?
In the future, this is a tremendous opportunity for the institution and for our entire program and our student athletes. The Missouri Valley is a wonderful conference, provides a higher level of visibility for our student athletes, which, especially in this new era of name, image, and likeness, is really important for our student athletes to have that platform. And in addition, the Missouri Valley has, in most sports, the opportunity for multiple teams to make the NCAA tournament, not only the conference champion. At-large bids become a greater possibility in the Missouri Valley moving forward. So we know that in the long run, it's the right decision for everyone involved. And again, in the short term, the pain that we're feeling right now and our student athletes are feeling, it doesn't need to occur. The Horizon League can make the choice to change their mind and do the right thing by its student athletes.
All right, well, we'll follow to see what the Horizon League does. And our thanks to Tiana Jackson and Michael Lippitz. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And now, Brandis, we toss it back to you.
Paris, thank you. A bipartisan deal in Congress to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act appears to be within reach. The act, originally introduced by then Senator Joe Biden in 1990, was last reauthorized in 2013. That authorization lapsed in 2019. The House voted to reauthorize the legislation in March of last year, but since then, the bill has been stalled in the Senate. On Wednesday, Illinois U.S. Senator Dick Durbin said a bipartisan group of senators had introduced a compromise deal.
Today in America, we anticipate there'll be 20,000 calls placed to domestic violence hotlines in our country. And that's because in the next minute, 60 seconds, we can expect nearly 20 people in America to be physically abused by an intimate partner in our country.
Joining us to share her thoughts on this apparent deal is Stephanie Love Patterson, Executive Director at Connections for Abused Women and Their Children, which provides support services for survivors of domestic violence. Stephanie, thank you for joining us. So it looks like,
for having me.
Of course, it looks like a deal is within reach. Why do you think this act needed to be renewed?
Well, Senator Durbin said it best. There are way too many hotline calls, 20,000 in this country, for individuals who are reaching out for help. Some of our most vulnerable members of our population are in danger. We need to have protections in place, including funding, including services for those victims who are reaching out at a time when it's really critical for them. And so I'm so thankful, I have to first say, to Senator Durbin for pushing this and being such an amazing advocate all along when it wasn't popular in other venues to make sure that these protections are put in place and that VOW is reauthorized.
Now, some of the things the act would do include strengthening rape prevention and education efforts, providing legal funding and increased support for marginalized communities, and grant programs for organizations that work on domestic violence issues. Give us a sense of the impact of programs like that. How helpful can they be?
Wow. Well, let's talk about prevention. Prevention is huge. If we really want to address this issue appropriately, if we really want to reach work towards a mission, as CAWC has, to end domestic violence, we have to look at prevention. Absolutely, intervention is critical. It's vital for folks that are reaching out. But we also look at getting into schools and other prevention initiatives to be able to stop domestic violence and sexual assault before it even gets started, to be able to interrupt those thoughts that using violence and other tactics is acceptable in relationships. And so that's really, really important. Strengthening legal assistance is also vitally important. There's a lot of legal issues that come along with being a victim of domestic violence. There's divorce, there's custody issues and things like that. Our organizations are very good at helping. CAWC has legal advocates. They're not attorneys. In some instances, victims need actual attorneys. And so being able to hire those staff to be able to assist
provides that additional support.
Complex cases. Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
We know that this had stalled in the Senate previously, mostly because of a provision that would prohibit someone previously convicted of stalking from possessing firearms, the so-called boyfriend loophole. That provision has now been excluded. Give us a sense of what that was and what's your reaction to that exclusion.
My reaction to that is, while I'm very grateful that they're moving the VOW reauthorization forward and that bill forward, I just think it's disheartening to know that that the gun laws will be taken away. Just because in the state of Illinois, in FY21, there was that 45% of the homicides that occurred in this state happened with the use of a firearm. So it's really, that's a huge number that people should be alarmed about. And so knowing that that's one of the weapons of choice for a lot of persons who cause harm, it just really is important, I think, and the domestic violence community thinks, to have provisions in there to take them away from individuals who have used them before, because they're telling us that this is something that they want to do and will most likely continue to do.
Now, the backers of this new bipartisan proposal, including Republican Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa and Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein of California, said they would have liked to have kept that provision in this deal, but in order to move forward, they knew that they needed something that could get to 60 votes. Do you think they were right to have compromised on that?
You know, I think, unfortunately, those of us in the domestic violence community, we're used to compromising. We're used to, taking kind of what we can get to advance protections and safety for, again, those most vulnerable in our community. But I think we just have to keep pushing. And so, yes, we are excited that this bill is moving forward, but we also know that we still have a great deal of work that we have to do in order to get provisions like that reintroduced into the VAWA Act.
Is there much overlap between, federal law, what this, proposal would have an impact on, and state law?
Yes, well, in terms of, and I'll talk about it in terms of funding, we get some funding. We get through city, local, state, and federal funding. And so some of this money will definitely be passed down through to local organizations like CEWC.
Okay. And of course, we've talked about the rise, or over the course of the pandemic, we've covered the increase in instances of domestic violence. What have you and your organization experienced or seen?
Well, this pandemic has really shown a spotlight on just so many aspects of domestic violence. And we did see an increase. The Illinois State Domestic Violence Hotline that's housed here in Chicago, through the first few weeks during our governor's mandate to shut down Illinois, saw, I believe it was a 19% increase in domestic violence related calls. A lot of times people think that because so many other things in our population and in our world stopped because of the pandemic, unfortunately, domestic violence stopped. That issue of power and control which is at the center of domestic violence, grew in intensity, and some people even use that in the way that they perpetrated domestic violence. And so there's definitely been an increase.
Okay. Stephanie Love Patterson, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me and covering this important topic. And again, thank you to Senator Durbin.
Up next, a new gallery dedicated to ancient Egyptian artworks explores everyday life and afterlife. We'll take you inside right after this.
Thousands of Puerto Ricans are taking to the streets to protest massive blackouts.
Over the years, Mexican culture, from food to music, has become woven into the city's tapestry.
Medical professionals share the latest recommendations on COVID-19 booster shots.
DACA recipients have been facing longer delays than normal in their status renewal.
Little Village is one of my favorite neighborhoods. This neighborhood comes together to celebrate such an important day in our culture.
And there's much more ahead on the program, including what's drawing people to work in the real estate industry right now. But first, back in 1890, the Art Institute of Chicago began collecting Egyptian art. Much of it has been out of view for years, but the museum spruced up the collection and is about to unveil it in a new gallery. Producer Mark Vitale has a preview of ancient art and the artifacts from the Nile Valley in North Africa.
A close look reveals details made by artisans thousands of years ago. Artifacts include tiny amulets, a sarcophagus, painted coffins, and depictions of animals, people, and gods.
It was really exciting to be able to get the collection on view again for the first time in 10 years. We spent a lot of time over the last several years researching the individual objects, conserving them, so treating them so that they'll be vibrant again in the gallery. Really thinking through the stories that the objects can tell.
Many stories deal with everyday life. Here, ducks and waterfowl are harvested for food. Other images depict the afterlife and reincarnation.
The works in the gallery cover about 3,000 years of ancient Egyptian history. So behind me, perhaps you'll see a really wonderful funerary mask that has a gilded face. And this would have been an object that would have been placed over the head of a mummified individual to give them protection in the afterlife.
There are no mummies on display, although this colorful coffin still contains mummified remains.
Egyptian art is so imbued with symbolism. They loved packing their art with a lot of information. So one symbol that you'll see, I think, frequently throughout the gallery is the lotus flower. So they saw this as kind of a symbol for regeneration and rebirth. You'll see images sometimes of lotuses, incorporated into jewelry, but you'll also see some really lovely images of women sniffing flowers as a symbol of their hope to be reborn in the next world. Generally speaking, being an artist in ancient Egypt was a family tradition. So like most jobs, positions were passed from father to son, and people were trained in a tradition from a relatively young age. Artists often worked in teams, especially when decorating things like tombs or temples. Here in Chicago, we're really lucky to have 3 collections of ancient Egyptian material in museums, the Oriental Institute, the Field Museum, and ours. But the Art Institute was actually the first to start collecting ancient Egyptian art. Our first true artifact came to us in 1890, and that was from a woman named Amelia Edwards, who was a co-founder of a British archaeological organization known as the Egypt Exploration Fund. Most of the works you'll be seeing in the gallery have been in the museum since the late 19th or early 20th century.
That includes a 4,000-year-old drawing, the oldest drawing in the museum's collection, and a richly decorated coffin that hasn't been shown in a gallery in 80 years.
Being an Egyptologist is such a fun field to be in. I think, part of it is the antiquity of the culture. We're looking at things that were produced 5,000 years ago in some cases. And of course, just, the beauty of the works they created and the vibrancy of their culture.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Mark Vitale.
The exhibition is called Life and Afterlife in Ancient Egypt. It opens tomorrow at the Art Institute of Chicago, and there's more to see on our website. And now, Brandis, back to you.
Thanks, Paris. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, how the village of Niles is reimagining its historic retail hub. We talk one-on-one with its mayor. The booming housing industry also sees an influx of realtors. Why so many have pivoted to selling real estate amid the pandemic. And remembering blues great Sam Lay, who died late last month in Chicago. But first, some more of today's top stories. A 15-year-old boy is facing a felony charge for allegedly making a violent threat against Lincoln Park High School. The teen has been charged as a juvenile with one single count of making a threat to a school building or person. Chicago police say he made the threat in a social media post yesterday morning, claiming he'd bring a gun to school and shoot the kids that annoy him. Chicago Public Schools has declined to comment on the matter. There's more of this story on our website. A Chicagoland reality TV star pleaded guilty today to federal charges of child pornography and illicit sexual conduct. 22-year-old Jeremiah, or Jerry Harris, was one of the breakout characters of the Netflix documentary series Cheer, released in 2020. But later that same year, federal prosecutors accused him of soliciting sexually explicit videos and photographs from an underage boy and soliciting sex from minors at cheerleading competitions. Harris was born in suburban Hinsdale and raised in Bolingbrook. His sentencing is scheduled for late June. COVID rates drop again in Chicago and throughout the state. Chicago recorded a 2.7% test positivity rate over the last 24 hours. That's compared to 4.1% a week ago. Meanwhile, the state recorded 5,400 new COVID cases and is running a 7-day average of 6,141 cases per day. That's down from nearly 9,400 a week ago. And it was 15 years ago today that Barack Obama started what would become a historic run for President of the United States.
I stand before you today to announce my candidacy for President of the United States of America.
And to commemorate the day, the state is planning to erect a historical marker on the grounds of the old state capitol, where Obama announced his candidacy. A year and a half later, he returned to that location to announce Joe Biden as his pick for vice president. The rest, as we know, is history. The Old State Capitol Foundation and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources say renderings of the historical marker have been completed, and a public ceremony will be scheduled for later this year. And now, Paris, we toss it back to you.
All right, Brandis, thanks a lot. And now we check back in with Nick Blumberg, who spent the day in Niles as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Nick.
Thanks, Paris. That's right. We're here with Niles Mayor George Alpagianis. Mayor Alpagianis, thank you for making some time on this chilly evening. We appreciate it.
Hey, good evening, Nick. Thanks for thinking about us here in the village of Niles.
Absolutely. So I know, there have been some efforts underway, some conversations talking about the redevelopment of Golf Mill Mall, a longtime staple in the community here that's had, its struggles, as many retail centers have. What are you hoping to accomplish with the renovation?
Thanks for asking that, Nick. So it's real exciting right now. So, during its day and its time, Golf Mill was considered probably one of the greatest shopping centers throughout the United States. Very happening, a lot of activity, a lot of great shopping, a lot of activities for kids, families, and everything else. And it went stagnant, just like you said, as a lot of malls have done over the years. But it's time for its rebirth. We've been working real tightly and closely with the owner, and there seems to be some great movement coming along. So we just released the first set of conceptual plans, and it's creating a real good buzz right now. So we're excited.
Yeah, what are some of the highlights? What are some of the things you're excited about?
The revamping of the mall itself and opening it back up. They're going to bring back the wheel, the Golf Mill wheel. So that's very cool, very exciting as well. It's going to bring back some of the nostalgia of what really made Golf Mill, create that buzz, that aura. Some high-end apartments are going to be going in. It looks like we're real excited about that. And some other things are in the work that we're just not really ready to talk about yet.
I know you've also been looking at doing some redevelopment of Golf Mill Park nearby. How important is that outdoor space as well to creating a sense of community?
Well, that's another thing we really want to do, is create that the more green space, open space, public art, something that we're really pushing for. One of the good things I saw that came out of COVID, people really realized they need to get out of the house. A lot more activity outside, walking, biking, bike paths, kids, children. And we want to open up Niles a little bit more for things of that nature as well.
Yeah, along those lines, the question of having that open space, those outdoor areas, I know you've been working some as well on infrastructure, on trying to improve things for pedestrians, cyclists. What are you looking at there?
We've got one of our most one of our least tapped resources, obviously, is the bike path that runs along the North Branch Trail here, the river. And we're bringing a lot of the bike paths over there to connect to it, which is going to be really neat and cool. So that's a big deal, too. Infrastructure, we've got about $18 million in streets that we're going to do over the next few years, well needed. And it's a lot more safety, too, for our pedestrians, bicyclists, and everything else as well.
So when you're thinking about all these redevelopment efforts, whether it's a retail space, an outdoor space, infrastructure, how important are those sorts of things to, as we said, creating that sense of community and trying to, maybe attract and retain residents?
Oh, yeah, and bringing in new residents as well. We've got a very strong and very stable community right now, but, the future lies in the youth, and we want to attract more young families to come over here. We've got some things and ideas right now working with community development in terms of architectural plans for the future of some of the smaller homes and help them along with that, including waiving permit fees and taking some of the smaller, older homes and revamping them and creating a more lively community as well with our housing market.
Yeah, for folks who maybe don't know the village as well, we've got about 30 seconds or so. What would you tell them about what makes it unique, what makes it attractive?
We have so much here. We are very fortunate. Great shopping, very local, very well located. We have $1.5 billion in retail sales here every year. Great schools, great parks, a lot of, we've got a very strong, solid community fiscally as well. So a lot of good stuff happening and a lot more to come as well.
All right, we look forward to seeing all that development in the future. Mayor George Alpagianis, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks to all of our folks out there in Niles. Appreciate everything, guys.
All right, we'll have much more coming up from Niles. We'll learn about some of the programs that the young people here can get involved with. But for now, Paris, back to you.
All right, a lot of stuff on the docket there in Niles. Thanks, Nick. And up next, we dive into the booming housing industry. But first, we take a look at the weather.
The housing market has been hot throughout the pandemic, and so is the industry itself, with more people getting into the business. Membership at the Illinois Realtors Association is up 15% in the past 5 years, and the past 2 years have seen the most significant growth. Joining us to discuss why so many are turning to real estate as a career are Jeff Baker, CEO of Illinois Realtors, a statewide trade association, and Dennis Rodkin, residential real estate reporter at Crane Chicago Business, who recently reported on the influx of people joining the real estate industry. Welcome to you both. Dennis, welcome back. So you recently reported, as we just said, on this influx of people entering the real estate industry. How significant is this increase?
It's big. It looks as if it's up about 8% in 2021 from 2020. I spoke to 3 organizations, Illinois Realtors, and you have Jeff here, the Main Street Organization of Realtors, which is Suburban, and Chicago Association of Realtors. All of them have seen a big influx, several thousand people in 2021 and late 2020 moved into real estate in the Chicago area.
Jeff Baker, have you noticed this in your membership as well, and why do you think that is?
Yeah, we have noticed it. As Dennis just alluded to or said, the membership is up both in 2020 and in 2021. I think the most obvious reason for that is the pandemic and some of the restrictions that were in place for some industries out there and some businesses being closed. So that does open a door for folks who are looking for a second or perhaps third career, or looking to exercise a little more control over their career path. So real estate and becoming a realtor is a really good, viable option for that. And so I think that explains the bulk of our membership increase over the last couple of years.
And certainly the hotness in the market provides a lot of business for those new folks to do. Earlier today, we spoke with Amy Wu. She got her license in 2019, but in 2020, after the pandemic hit, she decided to sell her restaurant and take on real estate full time. Let's listen to part of her reasoning.
If I am intentional, if I use the right methods, the right models in my business, the idea is I should be seeing that return, that ROI, right? The harder I work, or I should say the smarter we work, right? The more return we get.
Dennis, is this, similar to what you heard in your reporting? What kinds of people are entering the industry?
I was interested that it was people at every stage of life, brand new to the professional world, all the way up to nearly retired. Many of them had an interest already in real estate. They were investors. They enjoyed decorating, whatever it was. But a lot of them went in specifically because hospitality shut down, or another business they were in shut down. And they said, well, real estate kept operating during the pandemic. Real estate was one of the essential services from the very beginning of the pandemic. So if this track I'm on is blocked, what's one of the ones that is actually happening? And that was an early choice. But then, as you saw, the housing boom that kicked in because of the pandemic, that was confirmation of that choice all along the way.
Jeff, you talked about some of the opportunities that the industry provides with regards to flexibility and being your own boss, and a bit of what Amy Wu said as well, the ROI from how much you work. But, what are some of the challenges for new real estate agents who are brand new to this field?
Yeah, so Amy's comment is spot on in terms of being able to more directly link effort and reward, and that's something that the industry provides realtors. And so that's spot on as to one of the reasons that it attracts ambitious, and especially those who have an entrepreneurial spirit. But some of the challenges that some of the newcomers face, but also some of the more experienced realtors, is they are in a very heavily competitive industry, and they're all competing for a slimmer and slimmer number of homes that are available for sale. We're coming off of 2 consecutive years, in fact, more than that in terms of supply of housing. So there's less and less to compete over and more people to compete with. But that just drives folks like Amy and others to work even harder to get that reward at the end of the day.
Now, those who entered in the industry during the pandemic, they did so while the market was hot, as we've said. Jason Casebolt got his license in October 2020. Here's a bit from him.
This is the only market that I've operated in. I have not brokered real estate in, years past. It was definitely challenging, sure, but I would not have changed it for the world, because it taught me so much so quickly that in a different market, it might have taken me months, if not years, to learn some of the things that I learned just in my first 3, 6, 9 months as a real estate broker.
So, Dennis, at some point, the market's going to cool off. When it does, will the industry be able to sustain this level of people, of agents, basically, people working in it?
Well, probably not, but it is a business that you can enter and leave at different times. And we certainly saw a big flow out of personnel from the real estate industry when there was a housing crash in 2008. Not that it looks as if there's another housing crash coming, but if the market starts to slow down, then maybe some of these people say, okay, you know, that tided me over for a period and now I'm going on to something else. But the other idea is if you got in during this challenging market when it was hard to schedule open houses and closings were done in some cases from out in the car and that sort of thing, then maybe you sort of, you know, you were forged at a difficult time and can move forward in an easier market and sustain.
If you can make it then, you can keep making it. Jeff, before we let you go, of course, we know last year at this time, the real estate business was booming. It was a seller's market. How are we looking today, especially considering the impact of inflation?
Yeah, right now, I think the market's still strong, and I think it's going to stay that way for some time in 2022. We'll have to wait and see what happens with interest rates throughout the year and see the direct impact that has on mortgage rates. Obviously, that plays a role in people's ability to borrow to buy a home. Inflation does play a role in terms of people's ability to save for their next major purchase like a home. So those are potential major impacts on the industry. But because supply is still low and because demand is still high, and inflation can even in some cases increase that demand, because of those two factors, we do expect the market to stay hot throughout 2022.
Okay, I'm sure that's good news for a lot of current Illinois realtors. My thanks to Jeff Baker and Dennis Rodkin for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Up next, we check back in with Nick Blumberg, who's reporting live from suburban Niles. But first, a look at some events happening this weekend. And we'll check back in with Nick Blumberg in just a little bit. But first, drummer, vocalist, blues legend, and rock and roll Hall of Famer Sam Lay died in a Chicago nursing facility at the end of January. He was 86 years old. Lay played with blues greats like Willie Dixon, Howlin' Wolf, and Bo Diddley. He was the regular drummer for Muddy Waters for many years as well, and played on the classic Bob Dylan album Highway 61 Revisited. Back in 2017, when WTTW aired a documentary about his life, Lay visited us on Chicago Tonight. He spoke with Phil Ponce about the secret to his success.
One of the things you say in the documentary is that there's no one around who can play with any band like you can, in the sense that you can do it. You can jump in and be the drummer. How do you think you got to that point?
I listen very well when it involves music. I listen very well. I can hear a mistake before you even make it.
So it's a functioning of just being tuned in to what the other musicians are doing.
Want to try me out on it?
Oh no, I believe you. I believe you.
For real. I can, if somebody's got bad timing, I can hit a few bars or something before the bad timing and change it where it'll come out on time.
Wow, so that's why musicians like to work with you, because you can make them look good.
Well, I think that's my job.
The late blues legend Sam Lay back in 2017 here on Chicago Tonight. And now, Paris, back to you.
All right, thanks, Brandis. And now we go to Nick Blungberg, who spent the day in Niles as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Nick.
Thank you, Paris. We're here now with Michael Trevino, Niles Teen Center Coordinator. Thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. So can you tell me a little bit about the different things that you offer at the center, what a typical day there might look like?
Yeah, the Niles Teen Center is a first-class facility that's welcoming, it's structured, and it's very energizing and engaging for students. So we have a variety of programs in our facility. We have a game room, we have a computer lab, a kitchen where we teach life skills, a computer lab for kids can do their homework, and it's a great place for students to hang out.
And how important is it for students to have a place like that that feels like a space of their own, especially now that we're, into 2 years into a pandemic?
Yeah, COVID has hit all of us, and especially our students. We fight against isolation for students, sadness, depression, and so it's really important for students to have a place that they can call their own, that they can come to and feel at home. They connect with our staff very well, and we try to invest as much as we can in the students to support them.
Yeah, how did you have to pivot some of the services and things that you do, especially at the beginning of all of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the beginning, we were constantly pivoting. We went remote on video, so we did a lot of our programming online. We did remote dances, we did remote games, chess tournaments, and the kids, they were right in step with every pivot that we took. And so we are committed to reaching students during this time of COVID.
And how is it that you reach out to young people and invite them to become part of this program?
We have a great partnership with our local schools, and they have invited us in. They trust us to reach the students, and so they've been supportive of all our programs and events, and we're really grateful to the principals and administration of all our local schools.
And I know you do some work as well connecting young people with folks in the community who might need help with things like raking leaves or shoveling. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the community service work that they do?
Yeah, our students are really great to give back to the community. The Niles Youth Community Crew, they partner with our village-wide program called Snow Angels, and during the winter months, students adopt a family that is elderly or a vulnerable population, and they do snow removal. In the fall, they rake leaves. In the summer, they're helping with yard projects, and it's a really great partnership between the youth of the community and the elderly.
Yeah, I imagine that's got to be a cool opportunity to get to know your neighbors, older folks in the community that you might not be in touch with otherwise, that you might not get a chance to meet.
Correct. We've seen some really cool relationships develop between youth and the elderly. It's kind of special to see.
So what are your hopes for the future? You mentioned some of the challenges of the pandemic, the isolation, some of the mental health struggles that a lot of us have gone through. Yeah. I mean, how are you hoping to see things improve, and how do you want to play a role in that with the young people you work with?
We are very excited to see the youth starting to come out to more of our social gatherings, and our center is open now. We are following all COVID protocols, and it's great to see students really connected. We want to continue to see that with the development of the community and all the exciting things that the mayor has already mentioned. We're excited to be a part of that next generation, because it is about the next generation of youth, and those are going to be our future leaders.
Yeah, we've got about 30 seconds or so. What do you think are some of the keys there to make sure that young people are engaged in the community and that they perhaps stick around into the future?
I think it's continually offering state-of-the-art programming, things that build into the students, being able to partner with the community. We've had great partnerships with Home Depot, City Line Bible Church, Niles Design Engraving, all these organizations, Chick-fil-A, they have come and supported us, and so it's been great to partner with them. I think that's the key going forward, is the collaboration in the community.
All right, well, Michael Trevino, Niles Teen Center Coordinator, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And Paris, we go back to you.
All right, Nick, before we let you go, we've learned a lot about the different services people can take advantage of, all the redevelopment that's happening in Niles. Is there an overall theme you got from the people you spoke with there today?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a sense of looking toward the future. I think some of that is what we're all hoping for, that, this pandemic finally starts to recede significantly and that we can get back to some of the more ordinary day-to-day things that we look forward to in our life. Certainly that's true of a lot of the folks here, as you heard, with our different social service organizations. But I think, too, that increasing that sense of community, looking for those redevelopment opportunities, a park, outdoor space, green space, things like that they're beautiful amenities to look at and enjoy, but it also brings people together, and that's a lot of what we heard today.
A lot of community pride, not just in the city neighborhoods we visited, but the suburbs that we visit all the time, just like Niles tonight. All right, thank you, Nick. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Thursday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night at 7 for the Week in Review. And now we leave you tonight with some more music from the Sam Lay Blues Band from the album Shuffle Master. This song is called Sam Lay Shuffle. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.